It used to be, in the good old days, that rabbis only gave 2 sermons a year. Not that we would want to return to those days. One on Shabbat HaGadol, the Shabbat before Passover, and the other on this Shabbat, known as Shabbat Shuvah, which falls between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. Some say that Shabbat HaGadol, the Great Shabbat, got its name because the rabbi would speak for a very, very long time, detailing all of the responsibilities that people had to remember to keep a proper Passover, sometimes reading the entire Haggadah. He would talk for so long, and I say he, because in those times every rabbi was a he, maybe not such good old days. The people would be known to fall asleep and wake up hours later to still hear the rabbi droning on and on. Here's some good news. Shabbat Shuvah does not carry that same expectation. On Shabbat Shuvah, the Shabbat of return, the rabbi could speak briefly, as long as his message supported the people in their process of teshuvah, repentance. The goal was to inspire Jews to turn from their misdeeds and inactions so they might return to God, to each other, to the best version of themselves. It might have been a shorter assignment, but it was a tall order. Many rabbis used stories to illustrate their Shabbat Shuvah teachings. It was a way of drawing people in when they might otherwise zone out. One popular motif was royalty. Parables of a king symbolizing God, and his son, the prince, symbolizing Israel. Last Friday, our rabbinic intern, Emma Dubin, skillfully used one of these traditional fables to help us move from the end of Elul into Rosh Hashanah. I have decided to also use a story for tonight's teaching, but I'm going to update the metaphor a bit because on this side of the pond, the monarchy is a bit archaic. Instead, I will look to a metaphor that feels more relevant, perhaps uncomfortably relevant, the rodent problem in New York City. Instead of a fable about a king and a prince representing God and Israel, I am going to tell you a mostly true story about an animal control worker and a squirrel representing God and Israel. I can promise you've never heard this one before. There once was a feisty, adventurous squirrel who we will call Izzy. You got it, Izzy, Israel. One fall day, Izzy gnawed his way through insulation surrounding an air conditioner into the Brooklyn home of a prominent rabbi. Maybe he smelled the holiday brisket slowly cooking in the oven, or maybe he just lost his way. But whatever the reason, Izzy the squirrel was not where he belonged. The rabbi, meanwhile, was at the synagogue in a high holiday planning meeting when her cell phone rang. She saw the call was from her son, so she answered it. But before she could even say hello, the entire clergy team heard him shriek, "Ema! There's a squirrel swinging from the curtains in my bedroom." The rabbi calmly responded, "Close the door and take a deep breath. I'll be home soon. Everything will be all right." Of course, as soon as she hung up, she and her colleagues let out yelps and shuddered. The rabbi grabbed her jacket and headed home. When the rabbi arrived at her house, she checked on her son, who was too busy Googling how to get rid of squirrels trapped in your room, to even notice that she arrived. The rabbi took her own deep breath and peeked inside her son's bedroom. She saw Izzy the squirrel looping frantically, jumping from curtain to bookshelf to dresser to curtain to bookshelf to dresser to curtain to book. You got the idea. The rabbi gently closed the door and called animal control. They referred her to an organization we will call Kings County Animal Rescue. See what I did there? Kings County, it's Brooklyn. The royalty thing. Okay, not every joke lands. About an hour later, Mel from the animal rescue arrived. Mel, Melech, Malkeinu. When Mel opened the bedroom door, Izzy was nowhere to be seen. The rabbi was a bit relieved, but mostly unnerved. Mel set a trap and reassured her that the animal had either found his way out or was hiding somewhere and would eventually end up in the trap. Now, of course, the rabbi wanted her home to be rodent-free, but she was kind-hearted. She didn't want any harm to come to the squirrel. After all, the squirrel was just as eager to leave as she was eager for him to leave. Everyone, including Izzy, wanted Izzy to be where he belonged. "What happens when you trap him?" the rabbi asked Mel with some trepidation. "Oh, don't worry," said Mel, as compassionate as he was firm in judgment. "I won't hurt him. When I trap squirrels in Brooklyn, I release them in the Bronx. When I trap them in the Bronx, I release them in Queens. When I trap them in Queens, I release them in Brooklyn." "What? Why?" the rabbi asked. "Because squirrels have strong muscle memory," Mel explained. "If I release this squirrel nearby, he is likely to make his way back to your house over and over again, even though he doesn't want to be here. When I bring squirrels somewhere new, that helps them to break their pattern so they won't return to that same place where they were stuck." The rabbi said. "So basically a witness protection program for squirrels." Mel laughed. "I suppose you could think of it that way." "You know," the rabbi mulled out loud, "there is also a sermon here." Mel looked at the rabbi quizzically, smiled politely, and left. That Shabbat, which happened to be Shabbat Shuvah, the rabbi gave a sermon about teshuvah, reminding herself and her congregation that during this season of introspection, we focus our efforts on breaking down our negative patterns. She taught that as much as we may want to change, often we find ourselves trapped in reflexive, unhelpful patterns seemingly impossible to break. Like Izzy, the more frantically we try to scramble out of that place, the harder it feels to break free. We keep returning to people and places where we're not welcome, or where we've been hurt, or maybe where we've created the hurt. We keep falling back into negative patterns that are comfortable in their familiarity, but are bad for our bodies, our hearts, our souls. Maybe, instead of trying to muscle our way out of that unforgiving loop, the wise rabbi suggested, we could try something different. Slow down and take some deep breaths. Deep breaths always help. Then see where we are, identify where we belong, and visualize ourselves there. Finally, get out of our heads and reach deeper into our souls, deeper into that part of us that is tethered to God, drawing us back to our authentic selves, that part of ourselves that is truly at home. That is the pull we need to follow. The rabbi never found out what happened to Izzy the squirrel. She hoped and she believed that he settled down, released his panic and frenzy, and followed the deeper instinct inside of him, leading him back to the trees of Kings County where he belonged. I believe that too.